2020 Back to School Bash for children and adults with hearing loss and their families, sponsored by the SC Academy of Audiology. We'll be right with you. The live stream will start shortly. Logos, SC Association of the Deaf, Hands and Voices, South Carolina, Beginnings SC, Irmo Fire Department, and First Sound. "2020 Back to School Bash for children and adults with hearing loss and their families, sponsored by the SC Academy of Audiology. We'll be right with you. The live stream will start shortly. Logos, SC Association of the Deaf, Hands and Voices, South Carolina, Beginnings SC, Irmo Fire Department, and First Sound. Thank you to our generous event sponsors, South Carolina Academy of Audiology, Caro Smart Financial Solutions, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, Groucho's Deli, Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union, First Community Bank, Sinum, a professional employer organization, Nephron Pharmaceuticals, Bruegger's Bagels, Sorensen, Columbia Development, and Green Law Firm. Thank you to our generous event sponsors, South Carolina Academy of Audiology, Caro Smart Financial Solutions, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, Groucho's Deli, Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union, First Community Bank, Sinum, a professional employer organization, Nephron Pharmaceuticals, Bruegger's Bagels, Sorensen, Columbia Development, and Green Law Firm.
Hello, everyone. I'm Anita Steichen McDaniel, Executive Director for the South Carolina Association of the Deaf, and welcome to our Back to School Bash. This is our 5th annual Back to School Bash. How incredible. I know many of you tend to attend our Back to School Bash in person for the fellowship. Bring your deaf and hard of hearing children to see some videos and really just to enjoy yourself. And this year is so different. So we've decided to do it and host it online. And there will be many videos that you'll be able to see here. There will be many different things that you will be able to view and watch and enjoy. We have more information that will be online. We do have some speakers lined up this morning with various topics, including how to improve communication, community and hard of hearing topics, things that are specifically related to children, racism, Audism, and various topics for the deaf and hard of hearing communities. And we will have some things pertaining to our deaf and hard of hearing students, IEPs, rights, the pandemic, and the many challenges that are faced within socialization, emotional needs, and especially during this COVID-19. There will be a few deaf people that will be, or that are role models, that will be sharing their stories. And we will have a story time, and we will be here with you all morning. And this entire event will be streamed, and I really hope you enjoy this event until 12:30.
Raising the bar for deaf and hard of hearing children. Kathy Stair and Aileen Welch, SC Vocational Rehabilitation Department. This presentation is brought to you by Palmetto Citizens Federal Credit Union.
She's deaf. Hello, everyone. My name is Aileen Welch, and I am one of the counselors with Vocational Rehabilitation. And we're here today to talk about raising the bar for deaf and hard of hearing children in the state of South Carolina. So what is vocational rehabilitation doing for our deaf and hard of hearing children here in South Carolina? First, we partner with the National Deaf Center in Texas, because collaboration does help improve post-secondary outcomes for our deaf and hard of hearing students. And it helps increase opportunities and various things for our deaf and hard of hearing children, high school diploma tracks, and college and university diplomas, and various pathways that you can follow. We have research to practice models. The NDC uses census data to compare for post-secondary outcomes. We also identify root causes of why things might be happening. The National Deaf Center itself does research. They on identifying 5 key impact areas. One is designing accessible environments, promoting high expectations for success, collecting and using data for decision making, leveraging community resources, developing collaborative and integrated systems. There are many issues that are addressed. The South Carolina team has chosen promoting high expectations for success. And the work began with, how will this affect my child? National research using census data shows that children who are deaf or hard of hearing are behind their peers in enrollment in post-secondary education, finishing college and grad school levels, completing training programs, employment opportunities, and their overall earning potential. How do we raise this bar expectation? First, advocating for our children, providing opportunities for self-determination, and teaching self-advocacy skills. Youth autonomy, which is helping promote future success. Parents who believe their deaf and hard of hearing children will succeed do realize that this is an important opportunity to encourage and advocate for self-independence, for fostering autonomy, for instilling higher expectations in others, teachers, counselors, employers. It's never too early to start. When a parent or teacher stands up and teaches them how to advocate for themselves as they grow up, they will have a much larger opportunity for success. But what is self-determination? Individuals make choices and decisions based on personal preferences and motivations. For deaf and hard of hearing individuals, it is an important predictor of outcomes after high school for their futures. Some advantages: people with stronger self-determination skills are able to make their own choices, manage their time, solve problems, advocate for themselves. They're able to set goals and to make plans to reach their own goals. Self-determination skills are crucial for deaf and hard of hearing children. The other advantages are individuals are more likely to enroll in college. They are more likely to live independently. They have a more positive self-belief system. They are able to earn more money at work and plenty of other opportunities for career development. What is self-advocacy? It is the ability to share one's needs and make informed decisions about what support is needed to meet those needs. That would include knowledge of self, knowledge about rights, communication skills, as well as leadership skills. Self-advocacy benefits. The benefits of self-advocacy are an increased quality of life, a better sense of motivation, and an overall well-being, as well as a belief in themselves. So what can we do? How can we help our children or students build this skill? First, educate yourself. Communicate with the child's team and their support team. Know what accommodations are appropriate for your children. Seek support from organizations and other parents. And also allow your child to be dependent while teaching them to become independent. That would include maybe letting your child order some pizza or order food, or to say what they want to eat when you go out to a restaurant. That could include helping your children develop and be active in their own IEP or their school plans, or what do they want, or their needs that they might have. Do some role play situations. Maybe learning how to ask for help at school, or how to inform or let the teacher know that there's a hearing aid problem or it's broken, or encourage our children to express their emotions without judgment, just letting them speak freely, to give your children the opportunity to develop their own skills and to identify who they are. So how to develop self-advocacy skills in our deaf and hard of hearing individuals? We need to recognize and adopt a team effort, to collaborate with teachers, the VR counselors, other parents, other disability providers, work as a team to ensure individuals have many opportunities to learn, to practice skills like explaining communication needs, requesting accommodations that they need that would be important for them. You can encourage flexibility to discover what exactly fits, to learn what is best for deaf and hard of hearing individuals while they're young, which will increase familiarity with a range of accommodations and their ability to request and obtain and use them, to provide tools that can help one identify and understand their legal rights. It is very important to learn and understand the laws that are related to their accommodations. Being able to understand how these laws apply to a variety of settings and to educate others about equal access under the law. For older students, promoting understanding of our own hearing loss or their own hearing loss, being able to explain how it impacts their communication in various environments. For deaf and hard of hearing kids, being able to explain their communication and accommodation needs would be a first step, and to help develop their own personal toolbox. Developing a personal toolbox, you could help one by identifying, understanding their legal rights, by learning and understanding laws that are related to their accommodations, and being able to apply those laws to various settings. And how can deaf and hard of hearing children practice self-advocacy skills? First, attending their IEP meetings, volunteering at school-sponsored events and activities, participating in social events and family outings, making plans to use video or captioned phone equipment, practice asking questions at a store, ordering pizza for your family. Practicing self-advocacy skills is vital. People who practice self-advocacy skills often are more prepared to advocate for themselves in their future. Practicing self-advocacy skills helps you identify and know yourself. And strong self-advocacy skills should allow deaf and hard of hearing individuals to be able to describe what their needs are, to set their own goals, and to create a plan on how to achieve them. To know how, who, where, and when to ask for assistance, and to make decisions for themselves. Transition planning. What does that mean? Transition planning involves thinking about your life after high school and developing a plan for different paths like college, training opportunities, employment, independent living. Middle school and high school are times to focus on developing the skills you might need to compete and succeed in these areas. How can VR help? Vocational rehabilitation, transition services. We offer career counseling, vocational assessments, and that would mean some people who just don't know where they want to work, what kind of work they want. Vocational assessments can help the person identify their strengths, their weaknesses, their skill levels, what they're proficient at or not, and then to figure out which job would match them the best. We help with assistive technology, with job placement, and developing a person's soft skills, and also on the job training. If someone has never experienced work opportunities before, we can offer training and practice for that. VR can help in a variety of different ways during the transition process. Most important for our deaf and hard of hearing children is to develop self-advocacy skills within themselves. It is vital for their successful futures. Thank you so much.
Any questions? Ask your questions in the comments.
If you don't have a video.
Hi, I'm Kathy Stayer, and I'm the state coordinator for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services at Voc Rehab. And we did have one question in the chat box I'd like to respond to. The question was, when and how do I apply for VR services? And we technically serve students at 13 would be the youngest. That's what our program is allotted from the federal government. We can begin transition services at 13, and we serve all the way into adulthood. So a person would apply, a parent would apply with their child, could be at the school or at a Voc Rehab office. Every area of the state has a VR office, and our website, you can find the closest one to you. You can ask your school. Usually there's a transition counselor in the schools that would be able to direct you to the deaf and hard of hearing services part of VR. I did want to emphasize that we do start at 13, but that's not a magic number. And there's so much that can happen with teachers and parents working together to ensure that your child has access to what their hearing peers have access, so that the effects of the lack of incidental learning can be mitigated. Like I often would hear teachers or counselors say, well, you just have to advocate for yourself. And how do you know what that means if you've never seen it modeled for you? So think about that. One of the most important parts of raising the bar and of having high expectations is to think the absolute best that can happen for your child, high expectations, and then work with teachers, work with counselors, and expect them to also have high expectations for your child. And that will lead to better outcomes, college diplomas, better earning power, and more job satisfaction for your kids in adulthood. Thank you so much. Unless there's other questions, I'd be happy to do that. Okay, I do see a question for who is the VR counselor in Fort Mill. And we do have an office in Rock Hill, South Carolina. And the person that is in that office is Miss Tanya Wilkes. And so, but you can always go to the scvrd.net and you can get all of the information, phone numbers, and email addresses for the VR counselors. Thank you so much. Okay, wait, I have another question. I'm seeing my questions in the chat box, so hang on a second. The question is, I was told because my daughter goes to school in Washington, D.C., she couldn't receive service in South Carolina. We can serve students that go to school in Washington, D.C., unless they have a case open in the D.C. Voc Rehab system or the Maryland Voc Rehab system. But we serve students that go to Gallaudet University. We serve students that go to the Model Secondary School for the Deaf. And we continue their VR services in the summer when they're home. And we provide services, well, until the pandemic, we provided services to the students who live on campus at the Model Secondary School for the Deaf. We did that through video phone. We are able to communicate with students remotely through Zoom, and we're very happy to do that. So if there's a question about providing services, VR services in DC, please get in touch with me directly, and I will help you through that process. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today, and enjoy raising your kids and continue to have high expectations for them. Thank you.
Back to School Bash partner, Beginnings SC. Beginnings SC is a statewide nonprofit that provides expert knowledge and individualized planning strategies for parents, professionals, and communities to promote successful outcomes for children who are deaf or hard of hearing in South Carolina. Beginnings SC's program includes free parent education, hearing screenings, technical assistance, and training and advocacy. Facebook @BeginningsSC, Twitter @BeginningsSC, Instagram @beginnings_SC, email info@beginningssc.org, phone 803-216-1171, beginningssc.org. Vendor Spotlight, A.G. Bell, South Carolina.
Hello, Back to School Bashers. I'm Lisa White. I'm a speech language pathologist who lives in Greenville, South Carolina, and I'm a member of the South Carolina chapter for the Alexander Graham Bell Association for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. Thanks for the chance to tell you about our scholarship. It is the Dr. K. Todd Houston Scholarship that's offered annually. It's named in honor of Dr. K. Todd Houston, who was one of our founding members when the state chapter was founded in 1996. This is a $1,500 scholarship that is offered to a high school senior or to a college or technical school student who has hearing loss and uses speech as his or her primary mode of communication. To be eligible, students must be residents of South Carolina, but it's not necessary for them to attend college in the state of South Carolina. Do you know someone who might be interested? Maybe you are. If you are, please write down the following dates. Applications are available each year beginning in February and can be obtained from our Facebook page for the South Carolina chapter of A.G. Bell. Applications are due by March 31st each year. We are really excited to announce that our 2020 recipient has been selected. He's an 18-year-old rising college sophomore from Little River, South Carolina. His name is Elijah McDonald, and he's going to introduce himself in the following video. Thanks for watching.
Hey guys, my name's Elijah McDonald, and I am super honored to be the recipient of this year's A.G. Bell K. Todd Houston Scholarship. I'm 18 years old, and when I was born with hearing loss, about 50% in both ears, and I've had my hearing aid since I was about 3 years old. A little bit more about myself. Let's see, I'm from North Myrtle Beach. I'm home for the summer due to coronavirus and all that crazy stuff going on in the world right now, and but I'm studying aerospace engineering down in Daytona Beach, Florida. I go to a school called Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, and I'm about to be a sophomore. Next summer, I'm going to be working for Rolls-Royce as a controls engineering intern, and when I graduate, I actually plan on going into the aerospace defense sector. So things like missile systems, stealth aircraft, spy satellites, just all sorts of stuff and space stuff. Because I've always had an interest in space since I was a really little kid, and I figured, I'm really good at, math and science, and I really like working with people. So engineering has been like kind of my calling. So that's what I'm going to do. Right now in school, I'm actually the project lead of a project for our school's rocketry club. I am going to be working with avionics and payload integration, and for the clubs, all of the club's rockets. We launch rockets to like 10,000 feet, 30,000 feet. So that's me. I hope everybody is having a great, safe, and healthy summer. And they wanted me to let you guys go with a little word of advice from me. I would say nothing good ever happens without a little bit of hard work. Well, actually, no. Nothing good happens without a lot of hard work. You need a lot of hard work. That's everything I did in high school and has gotten to me where I am now. It was all hard work, and I keep seeing that play out in everything I do. The more work you put in, the better chance of having an awesome outcome it is. Whether it be school, sports, learning to play instruments, you just got to put your all into it, and it'll end up being super enjoyable, and you'll have a good day. All right, guys, thanks. I'll see you around. Have a good rest of your evening.
Back to School Bash partner, South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control. First Sound, SC Early Hearing Detection and Intervention EHDI program. First Sound works with stakeholders to meet the 136 goals of EHDI. 1. Infants born in South Carolina are screened for hearing at birth or by 1 month old. 3. Infants who do not pass the newborn hearing screening receive appropriate follow-up with an audiologist and have diagnosis by 3 months old. 6. Infants confirmed with hearing loss are referred for early intervention services by 6 months old. Vendor Spotlight. Prisma Health Children's Hospital, Camp Wonder Hands.
Camp Wonder Hands was founded by Miss Mariann Amick. Miss Mariann is hard of hearing and she has a son who is deaf. Since it was founded, Camp Wonder Hands has operated for 24 years. Camp Wonder Hands is a 6-day and 5-night camp that provides an opportunity for socialization and interaction with deaf and hard of hearing adults, college students, and other role models, as well as an opportunity to access our community. Camp Wonder Hands' mission is to provide an environment where deaf, and hard of hearing children all over the Midlands are given an opportunity and an environment where they are allowed to celebrate their unique culture, have an opportunity to express their own beautiful language, and also given an opportunity to build connections and confidence. It really is a great time. The dates for camp this year are June the 27th through July the 2nd, 2021. Staff, counselors, and volunteers will have a mandatory orientation on June the 25th as well as June the 26th, 2021. There's no cost to attend camp. For more information, contact E.T. Taylor at 803-296-5437 or email at campwonderhands@prismahealth.org. Thank you for watching.
Audism, Racism, and Ableism in the DHH community. Amelia, England, SC Vocational Rehabilitation Department. This presentation is brought to you by First Community Bank, We Lend Local.
We would like to take this opportunity to share with you this presentation about Audism and things that do affect the deaf and hard of hearing population and communities, and the effects that are outcomes of Audism and Ableism and racism. Particularly of importance is teaching our deaf and hard of hearing to stand up for themselves. If the parents are hearing individuals, we need to encourage our deaf and hard of hearing children to speak with their professionals in their area, adults, their counselors, their teachers. And I wanted to take an opportunity to speak about biases and the oppressive effects of Audism. The notion that one is superior based on one's ability to hear or to behave is the manner of one who hears, which is a quote by Tom Humphreys. The issues of Audism, levels of government and society create direct, indirect, and or systematic discrimination and discriminatory behavior against deaf people. Someone who is an autist could also be viewed as a racist in some perspectives, but an autist is particularly an act or a word used against a majority of the time the deaf and hard of hearing communities, people who sign. Audism is a word most of us would choose to use over other vocabulary. but autism is an act of discrimination against people who have a disability. Ableism is a structure that can have a wide range of effects, and discrimination happens against deaf and hard of hearing people is specifically called Audism. And an example of Audism, people who know how to sign, but who do not sign when a deaf or hard of hearing person is there in the group, would be an example of Audism. Or people who think they are superior to someone else, particularly talking about stories or shrugging or waving off someone who's deaf or hard of hearing and not including them, or doing the gesture of read my lips. That is something that would not be viewed as equal access and could be viewed as Audism. And Audism is a view of deafness, and there could be two different views or categories, as you see here on this image. Deafness as pathology. You have people who use cochlear implants. You have people who use hearing aids. This here is a list on this screen, a different comparison between the first view of deafness as a pathology and the second view of deafness as a difference. And there are various things listed in both of these categories to compare how those two perspectives are different. Racism within the deaf community. There is a much longer list than is here. And might not be a word that's used for all people with disabilities. We recently lost many lives with the Black Lives Movement, and that has been an ongoing movement for many years. And injustice still exists for all marginalized groups, but autism is particularly crippling. The deaf Black community had no communication access with the national civil rights organizations and their leaders. And it is often viewed with the color of your skin as to how much power you have, when in fact it shouldn't matter what color of skin you have. And no one should be superior over another person just based on their disability or non-disability or the color of their skin. There is a lot of stories that can be heard, seen, viewed, and a lot of different perspectives that need to be considered. The deaf Black community for many years, particularly in our history, had no access to communication at all. They were shunned, very much put aside. I would like to show a YouTube video, and there's the link here on your screen, about the effects of linguistics and autism on the development of a deaf person. And there is a person focused on in this who was involved in the research and studies of this. Cognitive language and the holistic approach within the a person's deaf experience. And there will be a PowerPoint at the end that can be viewed for access. Awful. If I can see it, I can't see it.
Many of you have heard of the term autism. It's a new term. It was coined in 1977 by Tom Humphreys. He wrote about that term in his PhD dissertation. And by autism, he meant some attitude which was prejudiced against hearing people. So the idea that deaf people were broken, needed to be fixed, or were inferior. And that if you wanted to be happy in this world, you really needed to be hearing. Linguisticism is related to autism, and the first time I heard that term was when Dr. MJ Bienvenu was presenting at RIT. She was the keynote speaker at one of our conferences, and she mentioned linguisticism, and that struck a chord with me. And it's about some prejudice against language, believing that one language is inferior to another. Many people do not believe, for example, that ASL is equivalent or has the same status, or is able to express the same things as English, for example. There are many studies which have been carried out in this field, but I want to talk about one study today which really looks specifically at the notions of autism and linguisticism. And I want to talk about resilience and this resilience. Of course, people experience stress, disagreements, adversities. That's the nature of life. If you don't have much resilience, you have a weak resilience, then let's see what happens. It really knocks you back, and it's hard to get back on your feet and really bounce back and get on with your life. It's very problematic. However, if you have a strong sense of resilience, this is what it looks like. Of course, it still knocks you back. It's just that you have the wherewithal to get up on your feet and carry on living your everyday life. So resilience is that power. And it's very important for school, for universities, for success in life and mental well-being. And there are two other important terms I really want to talk about now. protective factors, and risk factors. Protective factors, in terms of resilience, thinking about protective factors and risk factors. Protective factors are those things that help us develop a strong resilience. And risk factor are those things which cause our resilience to be weakened. So I just want to ask you all a question. Is being deaf a risk factor? Do we think that being deaf itself is a risk factor? Well, the team I work with don't believe it to be the case. There are many successful deaf people out in the big wide world who have excellent qualities. They earn more money than the average Joe. They're very successful deaf people in education that do much better than their hearing peers. So it doesn't appear deafness is a risk factor. But we would say that some kind of idea of internalized autism is a risk factor. That the idea you're continually exposed to being need to be fixed, or that you're broken. If you've internalized those ideas that you need to be fixed, then we feel that in and of itself is the risk factor. So we wanted to see if we could set up a test to see if that were the case. It's the Connor-Davidson scale, measures sense of personal competence, tolerance of negative effects, sense of social support, and acceptance. Well, I suppose the big question is, how do you measure this? There's a number of tests out there, but we use one which has been used with teenagers and young adults to ask them a variety of questions about their resilience. And it's a multiple choice, just a pen and paper exercise. So we use that for the task. So I suppose the next question is, how do we measure internalized autism? And that's kind of where the fun starts. In the research field of social cognition, they have a variety of different methods, one of which actually is used to measure racism, sexism, and other kinds of prejudices. So we borrowed from that mainstream test and actually tried to adapt it for autism. It's a computer-delivered test. And the idea is you push computer buttons and you measure reaction times. And this gives you an idea of what it looks like. There's good pictures and bad pictures. So I want you to remember these pictures. There's one set of pictures that which say something good, and there's another set of pictures which demonstrate bad things. So please take a good look. So if we look at the screen, we can see we have good on one side and bad on the other. So if you see something that is good, I want you to point to that side which represents good. And if you see something bad, I want you to point to the side that represents bad. Okay, so that's good. Well done. People, you're with me. Right, that's bad. I see you get it. Okay, so here's a little practice for you. Well done, everybody. It's quite fun to watch you all pointing to an empty space. So now let's play with another idea. We have pictures, deaf and hearing. If we think about the idea of deaf and hearing people, and we don't remember the faces, if it's a blue frame picture, then it means they're deaf. Yellow framed, it means they're hearing. Okay? So I'm going to do the exact same as before, only I want you to point in the space that represents deaf and point in the space that represents hearing. All right, here we go. Yep, you're with me. Well done. That was the practice. Okay, that was actually the practice. Now I want you to start the real experiment, which is another layer of complexity. We're going to try and mix the two conditions of deaf and hard of hearing, good and bad. If you see a picture, a drawn picture, which is good or bad, you need to point to good or bad. And if it's framed, blue or yellow, deaf or hearing. Got it? Right, that one's deaf, well done. Over here is bad, yes. let's proceed to the next stage. Now I'm going to run the test again, but now the fun starts. I'm going to swap where good and bad is located. And now bad is to your right. Okay, so let's have a go. The way we score is quite complicated. We have a fancy algorithm to analyze the data, and the whole point is the reaction time. And we administered this test to a variety of college students. It's a computer-based test, and we analyze their reaction times in different conditions. We have a result scale 5, deaf, good, bias, to 5, bad. So they co-occurred at the same time, whether that correlated with somebody having strong sense of deaf being good, and it was an internalized value, and if we had deaf and bad on the same side. Those people obviously would have a slower reaction. However, if someone had internalized the notion that deaf was bad, they have quicker reaction time when deaf and bad were on the same side. And we were trying to see if we could rate people's internalized attitudes, whether they identified deaf as good or deaf as bad. So we split the group in half, and we know that one side was internalized and the other. And so those who would say deaf was good, we would say had some protective factors, strong resilience. Those who thought deaf was bad, they had internalized autism. Now, you can remember that we also had that task that we administered, the multiple choice looking at resilience. Obviously, they scored high. That meant they had a strong resilience, and low score meant weak resilience. And we were interested to see how they correlated together. And that was interesting, is to those who saw deaf as good, scored the same level of resilience as their peers. Which is not the same. They clearly had internalized autism and had weak resilience. So what appeared to be protective factors? For us, we thought actually looking at deaf studies was an important field. And we often So again, let's think about how we can measure the notions like deaf culture. There's a test which is actually developed by a colleague here at Gallaudet University. The deaf We found that those who had high levels of resilience were people who socialized with the deaf community, American Sign Language reproduction test. We were also interested in looking at sign skills. A team of us were involved in developing a sign skills test. And on this scale, you can see high levels of ASL fluency and low levels of fluency. Those who had stronger levels of resilience also had better signing skills. So it seems that signing seemed to be a protective factor. So why is it important to use sign language and be involved in the deaf community? Well, our theory is about deaf capital. By capital, I mean knowledge and skills that you get from the deaf community. It also, almost like a toolbox you carry around. When you meet other deaf people, you gain knowledge from their experiences of navigating the world. And so when you're out in school and something happens that's frustrating, you have the tools with you to be able to deal with that. And you may have remembered at the beginning, I mentioned the term linguisticism. I think that is the problem. Many people don't value ASL. We know so many deaf people are actually born without deaf parents, and they don't have deaf capital. They don't have exposure to sign language. Of hearing families, less than 25% use sign language, which means many deaf children grow up with very poor, impoverished language skills. So this seems to be a risk factor. So in summary, internalizing autism is a risk factor. Deaf acculturation and sign language skills are protective factors. Autism is bad, linguisticism is bad. Deaf acculturation is good, learning sign language is good. The reason I think autism and linguisticism is bad is because in society, the ASL involvement in deaf community is important to us. So we need to educate them. We need to mentor young deaf children and young adults so they can in turn educate, lead, educate other people, and become leaders. Thank you so much. The question that's been asked is, how can I get teachers to have high expectations for my child? That's a really hard question to answer. My suggestion is try to get the teacher of the deaf, particularly in the state of South Carolina. I would start with them first and find out where the child is to see if we could be engaged or engaging with the teacher. Spread the word about information regarding the deaf community, exposure to anything and everything as much as possible. And it's not an overnight fix. It's going to take a lot of collaborative effort and data collection but information, get as much information to people as possible. The question here, what can hearing parents do to recognize, or how can they recognize autism? And that's a good question. Parents won't know what autism is unless you get the information from us and explain it to them. So again, spreading the word throughout the state of South Carolina, getting parents to see as much examples as they can related to autism, and hopefully it could start spreading and the understanding from there.
Thank you, Amelia. We will be switching over now to a presentation by Mariann Carter from Carter Hears.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mariann Carter, and I am humbled and delighted to be able to join all of you today. And I want to give a huge thank you to Able South Carolina, South Carolina Beginnings, our wonderful interpreters, and my fellow panelists and presenters. I am a teacher of the deaf by trade, and I'm also a trained administrator and an educational certified interpreter through the EIPA. I have a huge passion for deaf and hard of hearing children, and I always believe that my #1 credential is that I am a CODA, meaning that I am a child of 2 deaf adults. That experience in my life has led me to this path and certainly gives me a lot of background knowledge of being around a variety of deaf adults. I just want to share with you that as looming as the fall comes and districts are deciding what they're going to do, I hope the topic of teaching deaf and hard of hearing students virtually is helpful for you today. We don't know everything, but the one thing we can do on the immediate is have a good attitude about what's coming next. So I have this slide that says welcome students, because myself, along with the rest of you, are all students today on this topic. As a quick question, I was just hoping to see maybe who my audience is, because I want to make sure that when I touch on each slide, I know if we have VR counselors, parents, teachers of the deaf on with us, either on Facebook Live or on Zoom. So I really would love to see some comments, and I'm sure I'll get some great feedback. I don't have Facebook Live in front of me, but I'm sure I will be told who's all out there. And if you share who you are or what your role is in a child's life who's deaf and hard of hearing, if you can also share with me if there's anything specific that you're hoping to learn. And at any time during my presentation, if you have questions or have something you want to share, don't hold back. I'm okay for this to be interactive, because it certainly will be helpful for everyone. Ooh, we're changing it up. Hold on a second. I see we're changing the screen, so I apologize. I just want to make sure we get back to the presentation mode. There we go. All right. And in the chat, I see that we have a teacher of the deaf. Wonderful, so glad. An audiologist. Oh, I'm thrilled because we can talk about that today. Some parents. And I am delighted that you're here, because I'm sure you're having to make some decisions for fall if you haven't already. All right, well, I am so delighted that everybody's here, and thank you for sharing your background with me, because that will help me curtail my presentation. So. All righty. This fall, we're going to have a variety of types of learning options, and some districts have a variety and some districts only have one or two. And that means that one size is not going to fit all. And the very simple way of me showing you this is that there's no way we can compare a triangle to a square or square to a circle, but they're all shapes, which means they're all ways of learning, right? Each of the items that we're being offered for our kids primarily is a way for us to learn. It's important that we think about the needs for our children in a couple of different ways. One, the most important thing for parents and audiologists and teachers to think about is, what are the new accommodations and services that need to be considered? In my mind, those are the two primary areas on an IEP that will need to be discussed and thought about when you change the environment. There's also some specific needs that need to be considered, such as services and support. And the reason for that is that in a virtual environment, there's not as much similar opportunity for communication. And communication is a huge factor for our children who are deaf and hard of hearing. Exposure to vocabulary and being able to see how peers talk about things as differently than their teachers might talk about things. And so all of those pieces are extremely, extremely important. So we need to make sure that we're paying attention to those things. I just want to make sure that when you think about that, how are you going to, or how is the IEP team going to really consider additional language support or additional opportunities to discuss the items that they're being asked to do on a virtual platform? And then it's also important as a parent that you really evaluate, and I call this knowing yourself and knowing your child. Some kids really struggle with virtual learning, and that is because the demand and the prerequisite skills for that can be very complicated, which means that they primarily rely on video, print, and real time, but there's not the same amount of discussion and freedom that there is in a typical classroom. And understand that not all of our kids are going back to a typical classroom either. So it's not that one is better than another, but these are all factors we need to consider. So in taking that attitude moving forward, I just want to share with you that perhaps the idea is to take your skills and your child's skills and figure out exactly what meets your needs. Ultimately, the purpose here is to create equity, not equality. The reason the goal here is equity is because our kids need equal access to their environment, and it may look different. That is needed. As an example, you are finding that children who maybe are deaf and hard of hearing and the classroom is requiring a Google Meets platform, they might need 2 laptops and not 1. Melinda, I'm noticing in the chat that they'd like you to unmute your mic. Oh, thank you. All right. So what's important here is understanding that you should feel confident to ask for what is needed, and that is an appropriate request. Many times they'll say, well, we're offering this to all of our students, which is very wonderful and helpful, but it doesn't necessarily give us the same view or the same access to what's around us. So I ask you to keep this image in your mind just to make sure that you're not forgetting what's really important. At all times when you're looking at a situation, think about what will give your child the same opportunity, not just that they received the same thing. All right, now we're getting into the nitty gritty. And for the teacher of the deaf and the audiologist, I'm going to try to highlight specific items for you as we walk through this together. So accessibility is something that could even be considered for a 504 plan. It doesn't require that your child has an IEP. So I do want to just highlight that because some parents may have questions about that. And so I am going to cover some of that. The first thing is very important, which is accessibility. Like I gave an example earlier, it may be that your child needs multiple screens to access their learning. It may be that when they're in Zoom class, everyone needs to remember to be muted and take turns and use the chat feature. Another big important piece of accessibility, which we may not think about, is lighting. Some of our teachers don't have great lighting, and so that's very difficult when we are on screen. That also goes for our interpreters and facilitators that are working with students. You want to make sure that you use closed captioning tips. Depending on how your district is handling that, many times it's live, and so that means that only one person can be talking at a time, which means that accommodations like refer to the speaker, their name, and that information before you actually move forward. So the person who's moderating or teaching the class would need to say, Jenny highlighted, and talk about what they said. The other thing is you need to also consider what kind of classes are they taking and what kind of things might they be doing. For example, I have seen many times on math classes that they're showing the problem and they're not necessarily showing themselves. So when they're talking and expecting them to look at something. Another accessibility or accommodation would need to be that you don't talk, you show and then talk, but you can't show and talk at the same time. Some of the tools for learning, and this is important because a lot of our kids when they're in school have a variety of adults and peers that help keep them organized in a live setting. And so when we have to be on a virtual setting or a hybrid setting, we know that that's going to get a little more challenging, especially because a lot of our kids have multiple teachers or services that require them to perform or do certain tasks. So there are some supports for that, like the Google Assignment Tracker, and that is already there on Google Classroom, and you can pull that up. It's an Excel pre-made item where people can all go into that and help keep track of what's due when, so the team can really work together. Some things I would encourage parents to consider is, try to create a schedule for your child. It might be that it needs to be a visual schedule. It might be that it needs to be a written out schedule. Maybe it needs to be planned by them. But it's important that they track their learning. What did they accomplish that was a good grade? What do they need to revisit and check their work? There's also some great apps like PhotoMath or Extra Math and some ASL apps. And don't worry, I have all of this on the next screen for you guys to see. And then I talk about something called container building. And that may be an odd term, but I borrow that term from Brene Brown, who talks about container building. And that means that we're walking into a new environment. It's like we're being put into a new container. And we have to figure out how that's going to work. Now more than ever, communication regularly with our team is important. Setting expectations with our child or student and ourselves is important. As parents and teachers, we have to model what is expected. And we need to come up with regular times to check in with each other. There's going to be a lot of, container building is a lot of trial and error. And the reason this is important is because there's going to be things that we think in our mind or we plan in our mind that we think will make the class accessible, assignments more seamless, understanding and language more in depth. And we might find that there is a block. And when that happens, being consistent about talking with one another, checking on how assignments are being completed, being open enough and having a relationship that's big enough to say, we're struggling here, is super, super important. And I also will share with you for all three of these areas that asking the hard questions is going to be the most important task that you have as a parent, as an audiologist, or as a teacher of the deaf. As a teacher of the deaf, the example of a hard question would be to ask the general ed teachers, how are we going to set up the interpreter for your class? I have some ideas. Also ask, how are we going to manage interpreting if we're using real-time captioning features? An audiologist might ask the question, how is my child hearing and learning through the computer? Are they in a quiet environment at home? Do they really need their FM or DM system? Here's a tough one for some parents. Do I feel confident to check and evaluate my child's FM and DM system at home? Here's where I really ask team members to be honest and ask for help from each other and find a place to be vulnerable with each other, is really investigating how well we communicate with our children. Many times we have vocabulary that's referred to as tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 vocabulary. Tier 1 is really like our everyday conversation. Tier 2 might be more related to the environment or the situation that we're in. That usually gives our kids clues as to what we're talking about or the topic, or what words we might use. Tier 3 is very content specific, and it's in depth, and it requires us to think of a specific word and be able to mitigate what that word means in our own words. It's important for us to work together to help build those areas of vocabulary. And I would definitely ask the parents to say, hey, I've got really good capacity with tier 1 and 2, but I really need help with tier 3. So those are some things that I would suggest that you be comfortable with, because that's going to be an area of container building, especially in a virtual model. So I wanted to show you some simple accessibility examples. And these are actually not anything that I've created. I've given credit to the people that have created them down here right on the screen. But I'm going to tell you the things that I like about it. So as an example, this is under the category of accessibility. We'll see that we have a virtual learning matrix. This might be something that's more on target for our middle and high school kids. However, it also gives great examples of what each thing means. So we can talk about what it looks like and what it means. So with the SOAR virtual learning matrix, it has separate items like self-control, being on task, achievement, and respect. And I'll give you just a few simple examples. Under self-control, it says to minimize distractions. That is a certainly wonderful thing to review with your children and the environment that they're learning in at home, so that they can be on top of what they need to be on top of, which is the learning that's happening in front of them. As another example, being on task means that you're logging in and on time, present and actively engaged. This means that our kids need a word, they might need a bank of items that they can access to participate in chat, or come with specific questions ready before class starts. Achievement means to stay on top of your assignments. You might use the assignment tracker that I talked about. What does be prepared really look like? What do our kids need to have in front of them? Or more importantly, can they navigate multiple things on a screen? And this is where I talk about having the 2 screens, because they may need to keep it up for the captioning, or they need to keep it up for the interpreter, or both. But they may need another screen so that they can access pulling something up on an online platform, such as in their Google Classroom. And so those things are super important to remember. And then just simple things that our kids usually pick up on. And as teachers of the deaf, if you're working on functional skills, the R here with respect is a great thing to start thinking about. And a teacher of the deaf may want to tweak or add, if appropriate, if there's an assessment that you can complete, which I have a couple that I would recommend for online learning. And this would be helpful just to say, hey, we don't do all caps. We don't, when we have to help each other during group assignments, there's going to be a lot of chit chat going back and forth. Or if we have to set up a meeting room, we need to make sure that the interpreter is invited and that my peers know how to use turn taking so that we can use the real-time captioning. Those are all they sound very simple. They sound great to all of us, but those are not simple in real time unless you practice it. This other one that says live video tips. Here's why I love this one, is because it has a lot of visuals, and you may not notice it right away, but you might, depending on how you observe things. But you'll see here where it says minimize background noise, and it gives very specific examples, like the dog barking and the music notes and the fan running. And I know our audiologist probably is appreciating some of this. But that's really important. And again, good lighting, no lights behind you. Use a microphone or a headset. You can test some of these out. We have some examples that we've tried out, and you're certainly welcome to email me. It'll be at the end of the presentation. Using visuals. And if they're using visuals, they need to remember to show, then talk, or talk, then show. But these are just great fun ideas and simple ways to communicate with others about accessibility. All right, here's some tools for learning. So I wanted to just bring up some examples. At the bottom, you'll see this assignment tracker that is in Google under the Google Excel portion of the classroom. And it's blank when you get it. You can certainly make adjustments to it. And then on the left is ASL. This really goes back to the very important piece of how do I communicate with my child? Do I have the skills to do that? And how can we work to ensure understanding our sign form and the meaning that goes with those signs? So on the left here, you'll see that there's a bunch of different apps that you may want to consider. I will say that with the ASL stickers with Nile, I would say that's probably a little bit more for the older crowd, depending on what you're comfortable with. But there's all sorts of different options here, and even getting down to the Care Bears, and you can do that with 3, 4, and 5-year-olds. So I loved the options here, and there's not one that I recommend over another. You really just need to know yourself and your child in order to pick something that works for you. Again, as I mentioned before, photo math and extra math. Now, the last two that I didn't have a chance to mention, and I do want to highlight, is Flipgrid. Flipgrid is so cool. It is something that allows a teacher like myself or a general ed teacher to record a lesson, which means we can also make sure our captionings are accurate and also make sure that we have interpreting if we need it. And then what we do is we allow ourselves to record those lessons. And then when we send it from Flipgrid, it will allow students to respond in their own language, and they can create whatever the expectations are as far as the assignment is concerned. So it's really cool. And it also gives that time, and it also gives you that time to create accuracy with accessibility. Marco Polo, for those of you who might be already familiar with it, is also another way to ask and receive information in speech or ASL format. So you can say on a day maybe when you're giving an extra assignment, or if you want to remind them to complete an assignment, you can sign that to your student or the parent, and then you can get that information back from them if they want to respond and say, haha, I already did that assignment, I'm done, I can't wait to see you tomorrow. Or they can actually complete an assignment on Marco Polo where you basically give the instructions and then they have to put a response back to you. So these are all really cool tools for learning that might be helpful in a virtual environment. All right, this talks about building our container. And this is kind of what I talked about before, which is communication. How do we communicate? We might use multiple ways to communicate. And so it's important that we evaluate our communication skills and what we're good at. The second thing is, what's the plan? Who does what when, and why is this important? It's important because if we have constant check-ins with each other, then we know what's working and what's not, and why it worked in one situation and maybe it didn't work. For example, a plan that might have worked in math class did not work in science class. So that's super, super important. I would encourage teachers of the deaf and parents to what I call build their digital muscle. If children aren't used to where they find things on their desktop, or if you haven't organized that for them, or they don't know how to open one thing or another, that is going to be a huge challenge. If you practice and work on your technology and digital muscle, it gets them to independence, which means not as many parents have to be that close, or their learning partner has to be that close to help them with those things. Applying their reading and writing skills will be greater than ever. And again, that is why I really think that service time for teachers of the deaf and for interpreters and facilitators need to be heavily considered, obviously on a case-by-case basis, because none of us have the same child. And that's important to remember. A simple thing that I talked about earlier was creating a bank of chat questions, so that I think this is good for any kid, but it helps them, you know, copy and paste instead of typing everything out, unless it's got to be, they're going to add to it and be more specific. But I do think that that saves them time and effort when they're trying to learn, because once they go to type it, they're missing whatever else is happening on the screen. And then, like I said, use patterns to maintain and guide your practice. If you guys say we always meet on Friday morning at 10 o'clock, stick to that. And if you find that things are getting smoother, then maybe you meet every other week at 10 o'clock on a Friday. But you have to have patterns that maintain and guide good practice to make sure that accessibility and content understanding and performance are happening. So I was really conflicted as to whether to share this slide or not, but I do think it's important because I feel like sometimes educators or other people talk about this and they think everybody knows what it means. So this is asynchronous versus synchronous learning. Asynchronous is not live. It's recorded and planned with, it could be planned with a syllabus. As an example, that could be like that flip grid that I talked about. And there's a syllabus that goes with every single lesson. So they know what they have to read, do, and produce. Synchronous means that it's live. It's happening in real time. That's the joy of what we're doing right now. We're doing a synchronous learning experience. And so that also could mean that we have real meets. For example, if we have teachers who host smaller groups, or maybe there's some facilitation time that's happening to help the child work through some of the language that's in their tasks, those would be synchronous. It's happening where we can give back and forth information, or I'm live and it's happening in real time. Another piece of this would be in person. And this, of course, I put this here with safety measures. Of course, each district is following CDC guidelines, but they might look a little different. And it might be 5 days a week. Then the blended is a mix of the three. They're going to be in person, they're going to have some live learning, and then they're going to have some asynchronous learning. So there's a huge high demand on what we're asking our students to do, our teachers to do. And for the audiologist that's with us, it also creates some challenges with equipment to make sure that our kids have and our parents have the knowledge of how to hook everything up and test it and make sure that they're listening online and that it's accessible. And then also for those of us that are teachers of the deaf, equipment, if they're in a blended environment, will have to travel back and forth from home to school, depending on what their expectations are. But I highly think that that's going to be the case. But again, that's an IEP team decision and individualized. And then I just gave some examples of what that might look like. A lot of our schools that are doing virtual teaching are asking our teachers to go into school and teach from their classrooms, which is why I have that empty classroom there. Blended learning might look like you're at school 6 feet apart with your own water bottle, and you've got equipment in front of you, like that one kid has an iPad, but the other one doesn't. And then they might be going home and doing something different. And then the last one is in-person, traditional with safety. And we have to understand that some of our students who are deaf and hard of hearing do have other disabilities. And some of those classrooms are going to look very different. And we need to make sure we're considering those, all of those students in those situations as well. All right, accommodations. COVID-19 class. I just thought that that was so funny, so I had to put up that visual. So here are some very simple accommodations to get you started. And of course, if you think of more, I would love for you to put it in the chat or on Facebook Live, write it down so that we can make sure that we are sharing this with others, because of course, you're only the smartest person in the room when you're there by yourself. So accommodations, additional time. If there are going to be lessons that are recorded and then we need to get them captioned, or we need to have interpreting added to those videos, it's going to take a little turnaround time, meaning that we're going to have to arrange for that to happen. It needs to be produced, and then that link has to be sent to the family, the student, the teacher. And once that's complete, the child needs to complete whatever the task is for that lesson and access what's next. So I do think additional time may be necessary for some of our students in a virtual environment. Special microphones, we talked about this earlier. There are some special microphones that help keep us loud and close and we're not turning away, or ways to make sure that our signal is clear coming across the digital platform. FM and DM use, we need to make sure that we're thinking about how that's going to happen. How does that get transported? Who's responsible? Do we need to do any parent training versus teacher training? A lot of times on the IEP, we have teacher training to say, this is how they access your classroom and this is their equipment, and or you're going to have an interpreter in your room and you need to provide closed caption videos. But in this particular environment, we may be asking our parents to be the one that makes sure that their equipment is working that day, and they might need some training as well. So please keep that in mind. Videos may need to be signed, not just closed captions. So please keep that in mind. Again, my big one is no talk and show at the same time. You'd be surprised how comfortable we are doing that, so we can progress in our teaching time, and we have to stop. It's very important. For those of them that are in hybrid situations, face mask versus shields are important. And is the face mask visible? If that's also important. So those are things to think about. Most districts, and just so you know, from the State Department, they have provided 5 masks, which are not with a clear view, and 1 shield per teacher if they are on roster. That's from the State Department. And so that certainly is something that's been pushed out and approved. But each district is also working on their safety measures, so it's important to have those discussions. Closed or open captioning, word banks. And then this last one, sometimes we do this in general, but it's something to think about. On the digital platform, there's a lot coming at you. There's a lot that you're paying attention to, and it's in 2D. And it's hard to pull out what's important because we don't have that emphasis or the facial expression, or sometimes teachers say, this is important, so you should highlight this. But for our kids, with the amount of information they're taking in on a 2D screen, targeted notes that help them focus their time and effort on vocabulary and concepts may be more important. That may be an accommodation that you need to consider. I'm sorry. Okay, online assessment. Oh, I'm seeing some questions here, so I apologize. Kara, I apologize that I didn't catch this. On the online assessment, there's some discussion, and I certainly would open it up to the audiologist to share with me, because there's been some conversation about like FLE and is that appropriate? And do our kids have the ability to hear and do things? Some of it is just a functional assessment. And I can't share it now, but I'm certainly comfortable to email that or give some ideas to that after the presentation. I'm not sure that they're all research and evidence-based, but they are something, and we need something. Okay, another question. When you touch on elementary school aged kids, my 6-year-old severely struggled to do virtual learning. I have no doubt. She completely shut down and the days were very long and defeating. She loves her DHH teacher and interpreter, but will only speak and interact to them in person. My worry is if they do virtual, it would make her suffer emotionally and regress. Do you see this with the same age children? And what advice can you offer? So I really appreciate that question, because the younger ones are the harder ones, right? Because we love to talk back and forth with them and share with them and play with them. I will share this, that there are some innovative ideas that some districts or some teachers might be okay with, but like there are some ways to create a positive attitude online, meaning If your student is online and she has to create something and the teacher's going to come and pick it up outside of your driveway, that could be a motivator to be on the computer. Some of the other things that we do at Carter Hears is we have something called a lending library. And so it's actually tangible items that our teachers use online and that she also, your daughter and you, would have in front of you. So when I pick up the little pig, you get to pick up the little pig, and then we have that interaction. As far as some other pieces for emotional and social learning, I don't address that very much on here, but I certainly have some supports for that. So definitely email me. It basically talks about perhaps sharing, like one other simple example for emotional and social learning is to have a stuffed animal or something about that, and making sure that you like talk to the stuffed animal or create something else with the stuffed animal, so they're not having to interact just with the screen. And then, but we can observe those interactions, or we can ask the animal to do those things. Those are just some quick ideas. Of course, I don't know your child specifically, but that would be something that I would recommend as something to think about. All right, I know that we're getting close to my time, so I am going to just try to get through the next couple screens because it is important. Service considerations, some of these things I've already shared, which was 2 devices, Google Meets or Zoom for additional support, one-on-one teaching and tutoring, mail touchable materials. I just talked about that. Thank you for the parent asking that question and leading me to that. Lessons are matched with the learning option. So a blended learning style should have a blended approach. Something that they do live and in person should also have a virtual component that matches what they learned. Not everything is brand new. Classroom assignments should be embedded where they're appropriate, which means the teacher of the deaf can support the classroom. Using that muscle, mastering and finding and working in classrooms, container building goals. I want y'all to have container building goals. All the other things that I talked about, I think, are really here for the service considerations. So here's our class recap. What are the 3 things we need? Think equality, think equity, not equality. That's a mistake there. So I caught myself, which means accessibility, tools, and building our container. How can we do this? Honesty and communication. This means asking for what you need, telling the truth about your experience. We can do this through accommodations and service considerations. And then what type of learning is this? Think, what am I signing up for? Asynchronous, synchronous, in person, blended. This is one of my favorite slides of all time. I also have a gift, but I didn't put it on here. Do not overthink. This is one of my very favorite things. So here's our problem. Our glasses fog up when we wear a mask, right? The world's most important pro tip: a piece of medical tape on top of your mask will keep your glasses from fogging up for literally hours. And so, as a reminder to all of you, answers can be simple. They don't have to be complicated to be a good answer. Be open to experimenting. That's the container building piece that I talked about. Be honest about what works and what doesn't, communicating with the team on a regular basis. And always be willing to ask yourself and ask your child to do this. This is such a healthy social emotional thing that can be altered depending on their age. But what do I hope to learn? I hope today I learn how well I can hear my teacher. I hope to learn that captioning can be done when everybody has their mics off, on mute. Those are really good questions to be patient with yourself and patient. The student can be patient and the teacher can be patient. I think everybody, general ed teacher, ourselves that are here watching this, we're all feeling a little bit, we're filled with anxiety of the unknown. And so trying to not overthink and just live into the moment is super, super important. Thank you guys so very much. Comments, questions, and compliments. You always can reach out to me. Mariann Carter. That's my email address, my literal personal email address. So feel free to reach out to me. And I just want to say to all of you, my thoughts are with you. I'm definitely a champion for you and your children, and I'm happy to partner and support anyone. So please don't feel uncomfortable reaching out. And thank you again to all of those who sponsored today's event. I'm graciously thankful to be a part of it.
Beginnings SC in partnership with Clemson Languages Department, tutoring for students who use ASL. Maximize your learning with virtual weekly tutoring from an educational interpreter student at Clemson University. Apply here. Short URL @HVSW7. Beginnings of SC is pleased to partner with Clemson University's Department of Languages to provide hands-on learning experience to those who seek careers in the field of deaf education and improve outcomes for students with hearing loss in SC, working with available resources, teachers, and virtual meeting websites. Educational interpreter students will tutor students with hearing loss whose primary mode of communication is ASL and are in need of academic tutoring. Vendor Spotlight, SC Thrive. Want to know if you're eligible for the COVID-19 assistance program? If you meet these requirements, you may be eligible. You must be a South Carolina resident with proof of ID. The address on the ID must match the address on your lease. Your income must be at or below 80% of the area median income for the country where you live, and your employment or income must have been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. You must be past due on rent. The rental assistance payment must bring your rental balance current. You cannot currently receive any subsidized rental assistance. And you cannot be approved for or a recipient of the federal pandemic unemployment compensation, $600 additional weekly benefit. Visit rent.scthrive.org for more information and to apply. SC Thrive, rent.scthrive.org. Deaf Role Model, Elise Wilson. This segment is brought to you by Nephron Pharmaceuticals Corporation.
Hi, my name is Elise Wilson, and I'm from Charleston, South Carolina. I was born with a profound bilateral hearing loss and wear bilateral cochlear implants. My plan for the future is to have a family of my own, to continue traveling, and to continue moving forward in my career path. There are many things that I wish I would have told my younger self. The first would be to always believe in yourself. My parents would always tell me that I was destined for great things, but I would never believe them because I thought they were just my parents and didn't know anything. But truth is, they were right. You can plan out your life, but there will always be obstacles and hurdles to cross. But you can get through it if you set your mind to it. The second would be always advocate for yourself. There won't always be someone to go somewhere with you when you need to stand up and explain your hearing loss. I learned that in the 8th grade when I finally had to take initiative. And one of my best friends had diabetes, and she explained to the entire class how her pump works and how it helps her. So I did the same for my cochlear implants and how it benefits me. From that point on, I wore my hair up all the time because I felt much more confident and free. I wear my hair up pretty much all the time, except right now it's down. So you just need to be comfortable in your own skin and be proud of it. The third would be sports and school. Always be honest with your coaches and your teammates, especially if you need visual instruction like I did. That one-on-one can definitely be crucial. And to always let your teammates know how they can best support you so that you can improve together as a team. I participated in various sports such as softball, cross country, track and field, and basketball. I was also a swimmer for 12 years and competed on a swim team. I definitely did a mean butterfly. Don't think you would want to compete with me. The aqua implants were such an advantage now to how it was back then, because I am able to communicate with people in the water, the beach, the pool, and I can understand what's being going on, so I don't feel so isolated or silent. The last thing would be to relationships. Relationships are important socially, emotionally, and mentally, whether it's a personable relationship, professional, or romantic relationship. In the professional relationship, I would always tell my mentors what I needed and how to help me reach my full potential. All of them were excellent. In a romantic relationship, people would wonder, how do you tell someone that you have hearing loss, or how would they react to it? The first few relationships, it was tough for me to come out of my shell and tell them up front, which in hindsight, it was better to tell them up front so they don't think that you're ignoring them, etc. But I finally got used to it when I realized that my significant others were dating me for me. But I definitely got the real surprise when I met my now husband. Always wait for your person and never settle. He's actually filming this right now. The timeline that I had planned was to graduate college, attend graduate school, get married, and have a family of my own before I turn 30. I am 30 and nowhere near that, but I have graduated college and gotten married, so those are 2 pluses. I am still working on obtaining my goals. I have learned to be at peace with my life, to what happens is for a reason. My main advice to all those that are hearing impaired or hard of hearing, to always love and be kind to yourself, and always be appreciative of people who are trying to help you with your hearing loss. They may not know what to do or say, but know that they're there to lend a hand. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.
Vendor Spotlight, Able, South Carolina.
Hello, we are Able, South Carolina, and we are so excited to be with you today. Able, South Carolina is a center for independent living. We are geared toward helping individuals with disabilities to be independent and contributing members to the community. Able, South Carolina offers 5 core services to help individuals and youth with disabilities. The first core service is information and referral. We provide individuals with resources and information that can help them to be independent and make choices for themselves and their families. The second core service we offer is peer support. We have peer support groups that are peers with disabilities, for young adults with disabilities and youth as well as adults. The third core service that we offer is advocacy. We teach individuals with disabilities how to speak up for themselves and ask for supports or accommodations. And then we also represent people with disabilities as a whole in our communities. The fourth core service we have is transition. Transition is where young adults with disabilities go from being young adults in school age to adulthood. We look at options with young adults for what they want to do for their future. Everyone deserves the opportunity to be independent. Everyone deserves the opportunity to make choices for themselves. At the end of the day, we all need to know the skills for how to do that. So our fifth core service is independent living skills. And independent living skills are skills that help an individual to be successful and to be independent for themselves. And when we say independent, We are not saying an individual has to do it all by themselves, but independence is being able to make choices for your own life and what will work best for you. We also have some fabulous programs for young adults with disabilities as well. We have our EQUIP Youth Young Adult Leadership Group, and this group focuses on having young adults with disabilities learn the skills that they will need that will equip them for life. Skills like speaking up for themselves, which is also called self-advocacy, understanding the supports or reasonable accommodations you may need, not only in school, but in the community or for a job later on. It also helps individuals with disabilities develop job readiness skills. And it's a great opportunity to hang out with your peers and just have fun and socialize and do all of the things that all young adults want to do. We also have the Youth Leadership Forum, which is a statewide program for young adults with disabilities to learn how to be leaders in their community. We hope you will participate and be a part of our organization, Able South Carolina. You can reach us at www.able-sc.org. Thank you and have a wonderful day at the conference.
IEPs, Pandemics, and Your Rights. Jennifer Rainville, South Carolina Legal Services. This presentation is brought to you by Caro Smart Financial Solutions.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Rainville. I'm with South Carolina Legal Services. And this morning, I'm going to be talking about IEP, pandemics, and your rights. I'll try and keep an eye on questions as they pop up. Please feel free to ask me any questions. I'm an attorney with South Carolina Legal Services. And I have to tell you a little bit about South Carolina Legal Services in order for me to be able to speak to you guys today. Okay, so South Carolina Legal Services, we are a statewide law firm. We have offices all across the state, and we provide free civil representation to low-income South Carolinians. And let me see if I can, okay, perfect. And our services are free to low-income individuals. Our office in Columbia is located at 2109 Bull Street. We serve Kershaw, Lee, Lexington, Richland, and Sumter counties. This is the most important. If you need our help, you can apply online at sclegal.org. That's the easiest way. You can also apply over the phone by calling our intake number, and that number is 1-888-346-5592. So we don't just do education cases, and we represent people in courtrooms. We provide them with counsel and advice, and we do community education programs like this. And we do a variety of different kinds of cases. These are all the different kinds of cases that we handle. And so now we're going to move on to the good stuff, right? So the first thing we're going to talk about is what is an IEP? And some of this may be pretty basic for you, but I want to make sure that we all know that what we're talking about, that we have a good understanding for the terminology. So IEP stands for Individualized Education Program, and it's a plan that's developed for a student with a disability to ensure that that child receives a free and appropriate public education, which is FAPE. And we love our acronyms in special education. So in order to get an IEP, a child has to have a qualified disability. The school can request to evaluate your child, but you can also request to do it. And any kind of correspondence that we that you have with the school, we ask you to do that in writing because that leaves a good paper trail for you and for in case there's a problem later and something arises, okay? And so they do the evaluation. It's academic, developmental, and functional information. And if you don't agree with the district's evaluation, you can request something called an individualized educational evaluation, and that's done by a private person. It's called an IEE, and the district has to pay for that, okay? So IEP evaluations and the pandemic. Evaluations can be conducted virtually. There's been a lot of push from schools to maybe not do that, especially last school year. And there was sort of a distinguishing factor between last school year and this school year, and we'll kind of get into that. And an essential part of an evaluation is that there is assessment and observation that has to happen, right? They have to observe your child in the classroom to see sort of what the problems are. That assessment can happen virtually, right? Because this is a placement change is kind of what I would consider it, because you're learning from home. A lot of districts right now are wanting to sort of kick the can down the road and say, well, we can't do that observation until we return to the classroom. Well, I don't think that's necessarily accurate, because again, delaying this stuff is going to affect your child's development. And sometimes, or a lot of times when we're delaying these evaluations and getting the services, you're putting your kid at a further disadvantage. So when we talk about what an IEP is required to have, we talk about all of these different things here, how the child's disability affects their learning. We want to know where they're at, where are we going, how are we going to get there, and who's responsible for what. So that's what all of these sort of requirements here are saying, and we want to have data. Data drives everything, okay? And so again, where are we at? Where are we going? How are we going to get there? Who's responsible for us to get there, right? Like, who's driving the car? So that's what we're looking at when we're looking at what needs to be in that IEP. And so then the next thing that I want to talk about, which I caught the last presentation, which was excellent, and she talked a lot about accommodations and modifications. And so I want to make sure a lot of people aren't quite clear on what those are. And so accommodations are things that sort of help you along, and you're not altering or changing the assignment or anything like that. A modification is where maybe you're changing the assignment so that the student can better complete it, okay? And so if you only need accommodations, you may not need an IEP, you may just need a 504. But if you need those modifications or specialized instruction, that's sort of the distinguishing factor. And so when we talk about creating the IEP, it's a team effort, right? So there's a group of people who are supposed to be at each IEP team meeting. One of the big sort of pushes is sometimes they'll say, well, will you agree to excuse the special education, or not the general education teacher? And a lot of parents are like, well, yeah, okay. But the general education teacher is an important part of the team, because we need to know how your child functions in the general education setting. There's also sometimes, because we're having to cover those general ed teacher classrooms, they end up bringing in the PE teacher or the art teacher or the music teacher. And those may be the only outside teachers that your child has, and in which case that's probably the appropriate general education teacher to bring in. But there's a big difference between PE and reading, right? So you want to make sure that you're bringing in a general education teacher that can talk about what the child needs in the classroom, because PE is important, but reading is super important. You can request an IEP meeting at any time as a parent. It's called a special review, and the IEP is supposed to be reviewed annually. Oops. Okay, so notice of the IEP meeting, you're supposed to get notice of the IEP meeting early enough to ensure that you have the opportunity to attend. They're supposed to tell you the date, time, location, and purpose. And if your meeting is virtual, which I think we're going to see a lot of this school year, you can ask for a draft of the IEP document and any documents that you guys are going to discuss in advance. Ask for a copy of the data in advance. And the reason why you're going to want to do this is because you're going to want to prepare yourself for that meeting. Doing things virtually is very different than doing them in person. And a lot can be lost. So you want to make sure that you have everything you need and that you're prepared. And remember that when they provide you with a draft, it's just a draft. It's a jumping off point. It's not a final determination. I have very rarely been in an IEP where the draft ended up being the final document because parent input is important. So when we talk about participation in an IEP, it's up to the school to ensure that you as the parent understands what's happening in that meeting. So that means that they may have to provide an interpreter. And that also means they're supposed to explain all the terms that they use, right? So you need to stop the team anytime you don't understand what they're talking about, because sometimes when we get good at our jobs, right, and we're used to working with other people who know what we're talking about, we start rattling off complex terms that maybe somebody who's not an expert doesn't know. So special education, we love acronyms and we use them all the time. If you don't know what they're talking about, ask the team to stop and explain it to you until you do. They're not supposed to use those acronyms without explanation. And then another thing that we are firm believers of is that students should participate in the IEP if possible. That really teaches the student a great level of self-determination, self-advocacy skills, and your student then knows what their accommodations are and what their modifications are. So if they're not getting their accommodations, they can better articulate that to you as the parent. So it's good because then the student can also get comfortable saying, you know, teacher, I'm supposed to get X, or I'm supposed to take this test in a small setting. Where would you like me to go take it? And so they're able to sort of advocate and ask for those accommodations as well, which will help them down the road. So virtual IEPs, right? Again, it's not ideal, but I think at this point, we're at the point where it's necessary. Before the pandemic, I always told my parents to go to the IEP meeting in person, right? You need to sit at the table with these people, look them in the eye, and there's a lot of body language that you can pick up in an IEP meeting that you don't get from a telephone, right? Again, unfortunately, the pandemic sort of makes that unrealistic for a lot of people, and that's understandable. So again, these virtual IEPs are going to be necessary. Make sure you get a draft of all the documents, read through those documents carefully, and make a list in advance of your biggest concerns that you want to address, okay? You can share that list in advance with the school, okay? When you have an attorney, when I go with a parent to an IEP meeting, I always meet with that parent and say, what are your biggest concerns? We talk about what those concerns are, and then I share that with the district in advance, because sometimes they'll be like, oh gosh, it's something we didn't think of, or they can help explain to you why they're doing it a certain way, or you can actually get those, you'll get those concerns addressed. I always encourage people that video is better than phone, because again, you're still able to see what's going on and make eye contact, that kind of stuff. But again, even with the virtual IEPs, always make sure you participate and have the student participate. Don't, the districts can have the IEP meeting in your absence after they've contacted you and you haven't, attended. But don't be that parent that kind of falls into that, because I've seen students lose out on services that they absolutely essentially need when parents aren't there advocating for them and sort of pushing that forward. Oops. All right, so when we talk about goals of an IEP, the goals must be SMART, right? What does that mean? Specific, measurable, attainable, results-oriented, and time-bound. And then we also want it to pass something called the stranger test. And what that means is if you had to withdraw your child tomorrow from school and enroll them in another district, could somebody who doesn't know your child pick up that IEP, read it, and then say, okay, this is exactly the level the child's on, this is what services we need to provide, and sort of their education continues streamlessly. And so that is what we mean by when we say the stranger test. You want to make sure that it's very clear in the IEP what's written there in the 4 sort of corners of that paper document, that it absolutely makes sense and that anyone could come by and pick up that IEP and know exactly where your kid is, where they're going, and how they're getting there, okay? And who's responsible for what. And so this is a question, do schools have to provide special education to kids even if they're learning at home? Yes. So if the school provides educational services to the general education population, they must ensure that students with disabilities have equal access to those same opportunities. And that means they get FAPE, which is the free and appropriate education, public education. This includes providing necessary accommodations for the child and assistive technology. It also includes related services, and that's speech services or mental health. And so one of the things that they've been doing for a number of years in rural counties already is speech services, while not ideal, are being provided virtually. And so that is something that they are doing, sort of like a telemedicine type thing, where they're doing speech and language services for children. They are also doing mental health services that way. Are these IEP requirements, I got a question, are these IEP requirements the same for schools in the US? So IEP is a federal law, and each state sort of has some little specific requirements that they can sort of add in, but the IDEA, right, which is the federal law, is what provides most of the guidance, and then each state can supplement. So if you're watching from another state, your state may do things slightly differently than South Carolina. And so I would encourage you to reach out to somebody who would know those very state specific differences. There's some really good websites that we'll go over at the end. So what if the school's closed and not offering any learning to any student? And so that's sort of what we saw last year, was they weren't providing any new instruction, and they were just sort of giving materials to sort of maintain skills. And so there's some debate about whether or not that counted, and so whether or not they provided services. Now, some districts did a pretty good job. Some districts did a pretty good job and provided one-on-one educational services still to students. But again, virtual is not the same thing as in person. So what those services look like are going to have to be tweaked depending on what your environment is going to look like. And we all know that school is going to look very, very different this school year. So schools need to ensure that each student with a disability can be provided their special services that they need in their IEP to the greatest extent possible during the pandemic. And that's kind of squishy, right? Kind of like this puppy's face. And so that can be a squishy thing to talk about. And what you need to make sure that you're doing is, advocating for your child. If you reach a disagreement with the school about what those services should look like, I would encourage you to utilize the complaint process with the State Department of Education. There are also lots of programs that provide, free legal representation, like legal services, and I'll talk about some of those others as we go forward. And you just want to make sure that there are also parent organizations that sort of do parent advocacy. You want to make sure that you're making those requests to the school. You're doing it in writing, because that's super important, and that you're, holding their feet to the fire, so to speak, and making sure that they're doing what they need to do to serve your kid. Because who's harmed by postponing IEP meeting stuff? Everybody, right? The child loses out on services. The school has to play catch up on services. They're possibly going to owe something called compensatory education, right? Which is school to make up for what they messed up, and they possibly might have to reevaluate children to determine their present levels. I suspect that we're going to see a lot of regression in students when they come back late August, early September. And so there will probably be some reevaluations that need to take place. There's going to be some remediation that kids are going to need to sort of help get them back to where they were. Because the 2 months that they're off in the summer, we call that summer slide, where they sort of slide back a little bit. But now they had an even longer time off. The stress of the pandemic and all of that is likely going to really affect children in ways that we have not fully seen yet. And so there are some things that we need to talk about. We need to make sure that, there are tools that our child needs to receive a free and appropriate public education. That's internet access, right? Online or virtual instruction, instructional telephone calls, curriculum-based instructional activities, assistive technologies should be available for home use. They should have that functioning listening evaluation for online instruction to make sure that they are able to access and they're able to understand what's happening in the classroom, because virtual learning is very different. It's a lot harder, in my opinion, than sitting in a classroom. And so we just need to make sure that we have those things. If you have slow internet access, that can affect your ability to catch the material because your video is cutting out and you're just getting snippets here and there, which I'm sure we're all familiar with now. And so when we're using this IEP, we can also use it to sort of plan for the future as well, because we can use it to put in place some distance learning plans. If schools are closed again, we can talk about circumstances that would trigger that. If you have a child who maybe has health conditions and you have concerns, there may be a threshold at which, if they're attending in-person school, you want to pull them, and that can be made clear in the IEP. And they can make something called if your child catches COVID perhaps and is maybe out for an extended period of time, we could make something called an intermittent homebound plan, which sort of puts a plan in place for when they're out due to medical conditions or whatever. And that's not a new thing. We've been doing that for a number of years, but it's just a new way to sort of repurpose that. And so the U.S. Department of Education requires that school districts work with parents and collaborate creatively to devise services that fit the child's needs, right? Again, that's super squishy. And the good part is that we can be creative as we need to be. But the problem is sometimes the school district says, yeah, we don't have that, or we can't afford that. That is my favorite question or favorite comment when I'm at an IEP meeting and the school district says, well, yeah, he needs that, but we don't offer that service here. Well, that's not the parent's problem. The school district has to provide it if that's what the child needs for FAPE. And they can't say, we can't afford to pay for it, right? Because that's not an okay answer either. And so if you're getting answers like that from your school district, that's probably the time in which you want to look at pursuing further options, filing a complaint with the State Department or getting an attorney involved. When we talk about compensatory education services, we're talking about if a student isn't receiving services for an extended period of time, that schools must make an individualized determination as to whether and what extent compensatory education needs to be made, okay? And they're looking at making up for skills that may have been lost. So one of the ways that we use compensatory education services is if the school fails to provide FAPE, how do we make that up to the student? And so there may be some discussion, or I think there should be some good discussion this fall about what compensatory education services look like for students who missed out on instruction due to the pandemic and sort of have had some serious regressions and what that looks like. That can be all kinds of different things. Compensatory services can be one-on-one. I've had school districts pay for a child to do like Sylvan Learning Center or the Autism Academy, or sort of any other type of service that they need to sort of get them back to where they should be. But it could just be provided with a teacher one-on-one, right? Some schools give devices loaded with educational software like iPads or that kind of thing to satisfy those compensatory education services. So early intervention services, again, schools must collaborate creatively with parents to make sure that those services are still happening as well. We can't just say, meh, don't worry about it. We have to make sure that we are providing those services. And so how to advocate for your child, just make sure that your child's receiving the services that are individualized to their learning needs and that they provide effective access. The beauty of an IEP is that it's individualized, right? It's not a one-size-fits-all thing. Don't let a school say this is all we offer, right? Now, can you request a specific program or whatever by name? That's a little more debatable, and we could talk about that at length, but if your child needs, you know, a specific tool or technology or whatever to be able to access that curriculum and learn, that's something that you need to be asking for. There's teletherapy, tele-interventions. You can have those meetings on. Okay. There's online options for data tracking that schools have been doing for a number of years already, and they can share that with you as the parent. But what you want to make sure of is that anything that the school is doing, that there's documentation. Document everything. You want everything in writing. So that way, if there's a problem, you have proof of what happened. So additional resources for parents, South Carolina Legal Services, our services are free. We don't just do education, we do a bunch of civil stuff. So if you need help, please come see us. There's also the South Carolina School of Law Special Education Clinic. They have law students represent children in IEP meetings, State Department complaints, those kind of things. Those are free as well. There's a great website called rateslaw.com, which has some amazing articles. The South Carolina Education Law Bar Committee also has some great resources. There's protection and advocacy, and then always PTA and PTO organizations that you can go to for assistance. We will be taking some questions. I do have one question that I have already been asked, and something about losing access to the teacher of the deaf and all speech classes when they moved online, and how to make sure your child progresses. So what you want to do is you're going to want to make sure that you're asking the school, the IEP team, right? Asking them for what your child needs. You can talk about compensatory education services because your child may need those. And so you just want to make sure that he's showing that progress. And if not, you need to call a special review, right? You can call that at any time. All right. Are there any other questions for me? Are we expecting challenges to the start of the school through courts? So I think that we're gonna see some, every district's gonna be a little bit different in what they end up doing. Some are gonna do it well and some are not gonna do it well, as is any sort of educational thing. I don't know that we're going to see necessarily challenges until we start talking about compensatory education services for last school year, you know, we start talking about there's probably going to be some liability questions, that kind of stuff. Obviously, we've seen some challenges to the funding for the governor's given to private schools. But as far as seeing that immediately through the courts, not something that you're likely going to see. It'll probably take some time for those issues to really make their way into the courts. The other thing that, the exception of that will be if the US Department of Ed does something that sort of is outlandish and what is a violation of maybe federal rights, and people might challenge that. Do we have anything else? I will say that as you are sort of navigating the IEP process with your student this school year, you know, make sure that if you need assistance, that you're seeking out that assistance. This is going to be a really complicated and confusing time for everyone. And you're going to have to make decisions about what's right for your child, whether that's virtual instruction or the hybrid model, and based off what your district offers. But, you know, if there are issues with connectivity, you don't have access, they shouldn't be requiring you to drive somewhere or whatever. There can be limits, and there can be limits on what a parent can do, right? So just make sure that we are advocating for our children, we're asking questions, and we're holding the school districts accountable. This is going to be a hard time for everybody, and including teachers. And I'm waiting to see if I have any other questions pop up here in my little chat box.
I think those are all of the questions that we have right now, but thank you, Jennifer, for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anybody would like to apply for our services, again, you can apply online at www.sclegal.org, or you can call our intake number at 1-888-346-5592. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Jennifer. Bye. ASL Storytelling of Brown Bear, What Do You See? Book by Bill Martin Jr., ASL Interpretation by Kathy Holst. This segment is brought to you by Signum, a professional employer organization.
Hello, my name is Kathy Holst. The storytelling book we're going to use is called Brown Bear, What Do You See? Written by Bill Martin Jr., illustrated by Eric Carl. Hey, Brown Bear, what do you see? I see Red Bird looking at me. Red Bird, what do you see? I see Yellow Duck looking at me. Yellow Duck, what do you see? I see Blue Horse looking at me. Blue Horse, what do you see? I see green frog looking at me. Green frog, what do you see? I see purple cat looking at me. Purple cat, what do you see? I see a white dog looking at me. White dog, what do you see? I see a black sheep looking at me. Black sheep, what do you see? I see an orange fish looking at me. Orange fish, what do you see? I see a teacher looking at me. Teacher, what do you see? I see students all looking at me. Students, what do you see? We see a brown bear, a red bird, a yellow duck, a blue horse, a green frog, a purple cat, a white dog, a black sheep, an orange fish, and a teacher looking at us. That's what we see.
Back to School Bash partner, SC Association of the Deaf. The South Carolina Association of the Deaf, or SCAD, is a nonprofit statewide organization working with and for the South Carolina deaf and hard of hearing people. SCAD is the state affiliate of National Association of the Deaf, NAD. SCAD focuses on promoting the equal treatment of deaf and hard of hearing citizens in areas of education, employment, legislation, healthcare, and other fields. Facebook at SCAD INC, Twitter at SCAD_INC, Instagram SCA Deaf, phone 803-403-9255 VP, 803-794-3175 voice. ASL Rhythm of Brown Bear, What Do You See? Book by Bill Martin Jr. ASL Interpretation by Kathy Holst. This segment is brought to you by Columbia Development.
Hello, my name is Kathy Holst. This time, this is going to be rhythm-based and not necessarily voice-based. We're going to have rhythms such as this. It's going to be creative. And I know deaf children can learn rhythm, no matter the age. I have two children, one is deaf, one is hearing, and I will use some voice for my hearing child and sign language for my deaf child. So during, for example, bath time, they'll know bath, I might voice bath, or I will do a rhythm such as this, bath, bath, time, 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 bath, bath, that kind of rhythm. So time to eat, or time to sleep. So various creative ideas such as that. And you, with your own children, will have to be creative to come up with your own beat, so to speak. So brown bear, what do you see? And that was Bill Belton Jr., who wrote that, or authored that book. So The focus is on colors in the animal, not teaching or anything like that. It's just on those 3 points: color, the animal, and then how the animal moves or how the animal might roar or sound. So with that third thing, you'll have to, that's where you'll kind of include the movements with your voice. So those are the 3 things we're going to focus on. So we've got the beat going, the rhythm. And then 2, 1, 2 is kind of the beat. Okay, so 2 is related with the color, 1 beat for the animal, and then a third second beat for the movement. Brown bear, brown bear. Brown, brown bear. Red, red bird. Caw, caw. Blue, blue horse. Gallop, gallop. Green, green frog. Ribbit, ribbit. Purple, purple cat. Meow, meow. White, white dog. Bark, bark. Black, black sheep. Orange, orange fish. That's kind of the rhythm we're going to be following. So I hope you've enjoyed this.
Deaf role model, Ansley Smith. This segment is brought to you by Sorensen.
Hey everyone, my name is Ansley Smith and I'm a senior at Winthrop University majoring in biology. I was born with hearing loss and wear a hearing aid in each ear. In the future, I plan to attend graduate school for speech-language pathology and eventually return to study audiology. My advice to younger students is to advocate for yourself and remember that it's okay to ask for help.
Challenges of meeting social emotional needs during COVID-19. Jennifer Villar, South Carolina Department of Mental Health Deaf Services. This presentation is brought to you by Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina.
We know that times are tough right now, and we know that due to the coronavirus, many people are experiencing anxiety and depression. We are here to support children, families, parents, teachers, and interpreters. We want to share what we've been doing since the coronavirus hit and how we've been continuing to provide services to our clients as well as new clients through referrals. Thanks to technology, we've been able to use a variety of platforms like video phone, Zoom, FaceTime, Duo, and Microsoft Teams. We use these to provide therapy through telehealth. We do have some clients who have a higher level of need, and we visit them in the community. When that happens, we ensure to follow safety measures such as screening questions prior to the appointment, wearing a mask, and having hand sanitizer available, and practicing social distance of 6 feet apart. Sessions are not limited to just kids, but also to families, parents, and school staff who may be struggling on ideas on how to support their child during this odd time. We see the clinician and child working on processing their feelings and recognizing what is bothering them, as well as providing suggestions. This is an ongoing process, and through having a supportive deaf adult or someone who can help the client feel comfortable having someone that they can relate to on some level.
We would like to show an example of how a telehealth session may look through this role play between a child and a clinician.
Hi, before we start with the session, I want to make sure you're in a quiet place. You don't have any distractions or anything?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. I know we've been meeting through Zoom, so we'll have the same privacy and confidentiality that we've had at school or other places where we met. Is it all right to use Zoom today?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So how are you doing today?
I'm feeling sad.
Yeah, you look sad. What's wrong? What's going on?
Well, today after school, I talked with my dad and my teacher, and they said that I needed to be more, what was the word? DESP, DESPO and something.
Do you mean responsible? Is that what you're trying to say?
That's why I'm feeling sad. I mean, they talked about it and made me sad.
So if you're sad, I thank you for sharing your feelings with me. That word responsible, what does that mean to you?
I mean, I don't know what it means, but I mean, I guess it means like taking care of my things.
That's a good example. How do you know if you're taking care of your things at home? What's an example of something that you do at home?
You know, like if my parents ask me to do something and I do it, I guess.
So if they ask you to do something and you don't understand, how do you let them know you don't understand what you need to do?
I could ask them, you know, to explain it better.
Yeah, you can ask them for help, what they expect from you. You could do that for yourself, but I know sometimes it's hard to learn everything that you're still learning.
Yeah, but sometimes I forget things. You know, I don't want them to be upset with me. I don't know how to remember things. Do you have anything that would help me, maybe, or help me remember better?
Yeah, I'm curious if you have any examples of things that your parents ask you to do when you're at home. So what do you do to help your parents?
I tend to feed the dog.
Okay.
I take the trash out.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I sweep the floor. And then sometimes I clean my room.
Okay. I know you love art too, right?
Yeah.
So maybe you could try drawing a picture of a dog, and maybe ask your parents what time they want you to feed the dog, and say put 4 o'clock with a picture of the dog and on the refrigerator, so that at 4 o'clock every day it reminds you to feed the dog. Would that help you remember better?
I like that idea. That's a good idea. I love drawing, but what do I do if I mess up?
If you make a mistake, it's okay. It doesn't mean anything awful. You can tell your parents you forgot or that you made a mistake. What's important is that you communicate with your parents. And if your parents realize you're trying, then they won't be as upset with you, especially if you're showing that you're trying to change. Open communication is really important. So I really appreciate you talking with me about it, and we can talk about it more at the next session.
Okay, yeah, I feel a little bit better. I think I'm going to draw a picture today.
I'm glad you feel better. I'm glad it worked out.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. With the world being full of uncertainty and times being tough for many of us, we encourage children and their families to consider participating in therapy to continue to promote their social emotional well-being and identify ways to express themselves. Isolation is a difficult thing, especially for those who are deaf and hard of hearing and accustomed to being around their peers. It's beneficial for them to have someone to talk to who can relate in some way to their experience as a deaf and hard of hearing individual. Reaching out for help does not necessarily mean something is wrong with you, but presents opportunities for you to be open in expressing your feelings, as well as obtaining further insight in various life issues that may be impacting you. This is not limited to just clients and families. This goes for school staff who may be unsure how to proceed with the school year. We are here to provide you support and serve as an ally between clients and families and the school system. Anyone in the state of South Carolina qualifies for services. When one loses their ability to interact with other peers, especially in an academic setting, this can cause more emotional distress, and a person's sense of isolation increases. Counseling will help identify those things and process them. SC Hopes is also available through a grant program to assist those who have been impacted by COVID-19. We also have a 24/7 hotline available at 803-339-3339 or Deaf Hotline at scdmh.org. Referrals can be sent through there, and someone will be in touch with you as soon as we can. Thank you for having us.
SC DMH Deaf Services, 803-339-3339. Any questions? Ask your questions in the comments.
Hello, everyone. Is there any questions I can answer? And we had the question here. Okay, how can parents support social emotional learning? Great question. So part of the therapy that we provide is family therapy, counseling to parents and how to encourage the children and how to get involved with IEP, emotional issues, tips for socialization with friends. I know with the COVID things, it's very odd, very hard to get involved and get that social activity, but we can definitely help parents too with their children and providing different types of intervention. What if my child doesn't understand all the words about school? How would I be able to ensure that there's no fear when school goes back? And definitely there's going to be a lot of diverse emotions, and definitely with counseling and therapy options, we can provide that intervention, vocabulary, work on language, making sure comprehension is there, particularly with varying ages. We can answer any questions about feelings and concerns and what could be fitting for each person's style of learning and language and level of language, because one size, like we said, does not fit all. So we definitely can meet with a child. As a parent, are there tools I can use today to help my child feel ready to go back? There's many tools that are available, and we have a lot of visual aids that we can work with the children. We can work with just simply discussion and talking and show them different examples of what things look like to help provide a bigger picture. But definitely working with the parents, with the schools about expectations will be important, not to get overwhelmed. And some of that can be overwhelming. We can work with different ways to adjust, being flexible with resources, with a variety of needs that could be accessed. And I wanted to add one little tidbit too. So far, we've been able to provide visual video connections, but because of COVID, we weren't, well, before COVID, we weren't as flexible, but now we are able to provide a lot more flexibility in getting services. And this has been very helpful to provide services we weren't able to provide before, which is providing more access statewide. And now with video connection and technology, there's a lot more options available to our families than before COVID.
I think that's it for questions.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Back to School Bash partner, SC Hands and Voices. SC Hands and Voices is a growing chapter of the National Hands and Voices organization. We are a parent-driven nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting SC families of children who are deaf or hard of hearing. We are unbiased about communication methodologies and believe that families can make the best choices for their child if they have access to good information and support. Our membership includes families who communicate manually and/or orally. From American Sign Language to cochlear implants, our organization represents people from all different approaches to and experiences with deafness or hearing loss. Facebook at schv.org, phone 803-999-7587, email schandsandvoices@gmail.com. Deaf role model, Lionel Henry. This segment is brought to you by Green Law Firm, Personal Injury Attorneys.
Hello, my name is Lionel. I am hard of hearing, and I work at Blue Cross Blue Shield. I've worked there for 8 years. I'm married and have 2 children. Our oldest child is deaf, and our second child, our son, is hearing. We plan to have a bigger house with a big yard. I want to renovate it myself. And want to have the typical things a household would have and a home would have, and do those renovations that I can. Also, my plan is to have more money, of course. Ha ha ha. What I would like people to learn, if you meet a deaf person, is that there's a lot of different versions of signed vocabulary. Deaf culture would be something that would be important to know and to learn about. Always try to interact with deaf people you can. Get out, experience different states, different regions would be important, because you'll see a variety of deaf people and you'll be able to have a variety of experiences. I would encourage people to go to different deaf events just to get exposure to the deaf community. Thank you for watching.
Back to School Badge partner, Irmo Fire Department. Fire Safe South Carolina, a community risk reduction program. For SC residents who are deaf or hard of hearing, the Hearing Impaired Smoke Alarm Program provides technology to supplement smoke alarms. Technology commonly known as a bed shaker works with smoke alarms to notify individuals of a possible life-threatening fire emergency. Facebook at Irmo Fire, Twitter at Irmo Fire, Instagram at Irmo Fire, email bhaley@irmofire.org or firesafesc@llr.sc.gov. Phone 803-896-5454. irmofire.org.
So today we're thankful to be joined by Jason Rudich as well as members of the City of Greenville Fire Department to install a hearing impaired smoke alarm.
So this is what's considered or called a LifeTone HL. It operates both as a regular fire alarm clock and also as a safety device. And so it's a very unique product. It was simply installed. It allows for, and we're going to show when we go inside your room, a component to go underneath your mattress. It plugs into the wall and it also uses batteries. It operates off of the sound of the smoke detectors. So when they go off, it will activate this device. And for those that are hearing impaired, it shakes or vibrates. And even for those in the home, it has an audio component in multiple languages.
This is a resource of independence for the deaf community. I mean, this is my first time right now in my life to have a fire alarm that is accessible to me as a deaf person.
There's an application on firesafe.sc.gov that someone can go onto the website, print the application out, and then complete it.
I'm thankful truly for that proactive effort here in the state of South Carolina for fire safety. For people like me, it's truly extraordinary.
Topic Tuesdays 2.0, a virtual format with ASL interpreters and transcription for educational social support meetings for parents of children who are deaf or hard of hearing. Upcoming dates and topics include August 18th, 7 to 8 p.m., The Importance of Family Involvement, Joanne Benfield, Director, Gallaudet, University Regional Center South. September 15th, 12 to 1 p.m., Language Acquisition for Child with Hearing Loss, Fingerspelling Techniques. Linda Schott, Program Assistant, SCSDB, Division of Outreach Services Early Intervention. October 20th, 7 to 8 p.m., Intro to Deaf Blindness, Krista Lee Olson, Technical Assistant, SCSDB. November 17th, 12 to 1 p.m., Fostering Joy, Candace Lindo Davies, Director of Outreach, Hands and Voices. December 15th, 7 to 8 p.m., The Value of the Calendar System. Vendor Spotlight, SC Department of Mental Health, Deaf Services.
Hello, my name is Dara Burrell. I'm the Director for Deaf Services. Welcome to the South Carolina Department of Mental Health. We look forward to working with you. We would like to offer our support services.
We work with children.
Working with family, children, and adults. We are a statewide program, meaning we cover the entire state of South Carolina.
Those
services that we offer are individual services,
assessments, psychiatric services, case management. Those kinds of services are available for you depending on your insurance and or your copays. And we also have available for a hotline for crisis services. That number is 803-339-3339. That's there 24/7 for you if you need something. We also take our referrals through that phone line. If you're needing support, reach out and contact us. We look forward to hearing from you. Now, I want to share about one of our very exciting programs that we have just for you. This program is our school-based mental health services. So we have two ladies who work specifically with family and children, so let's introduce them.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Villar. I am the School Mental Health Coordinator with the South Carolina Department of Mental Health's Deaf Services Program. I provide services for children and adults. We have another staff member who also provides school-based services here.
Hi, my name is Tanya McDonald. I'm a school-based therapist for the South Carolina Department of Mental Health Deaf Services. I mostly provide therapeutic services for children, teens, and adults.
Deaf role model, Olive Henry. This segment is brought to you by Bruegger's Bagels.
Hello, my name is Olive Henry. This is my sign name and O on the chin. I am deaf. And I would like to introduce myself and give a little background. Like I said, I'm a deaf woman and I have 2 children. One is deaf, one is hearing. I have taught ASL classes. And I have provided some ASL facilitating services. And I really love providing those type of services. My future plans would be to encourage my kids to have goals for their lives. To really be an encourager to them, to roll up their sleeves and to be a good teacher to them. To encourage them in school. With our youth, I would like to be someone who would share things of encouragement to them as well. To be a role model to them. To teach them how to respect one another. To encourage them to educate themselves. I have so many things that I would like to share with our deaf youth, even our hearing youth. I would like to see the future of the deaf community to evolve, to grow, to continue to thrive forward and upward. Thank you for watching this segment.
Vendor Spotlight, SC Statewide Deafblind Project.
Hello, I'm Krista Olson, a technical assistant for the South Carolina Statewide Deafblind Project. We are a federally funded grant serving individuals from birth to 21 experiencing deafblindness. Deafblindness is also known as dual sensory loss and means that an individual has a combined hearing loss at any level. Our Deafblind Project is tasked with several goals. First, we collect data for the deafblind census in the state of South Carolina. Any individual with a dual sensory loss is eligible for free technical assistance services from the Deafblind Project. While we do not serve children directly, we work with the families, schools, and communities of individuals experiencing dual sensory loss. Second, we work to identify children as soon as possible to support the families and professionals. Early intervention is key to access for these children. Third, we can assist with transition services for students 14 and older. Our staff works with Vocational Rehab, the Commission for the Blind, and the Helen Keller National Center to support student needs. In addition, we can assist in person-centered planning and collaborate with other deafblind projects to provide transition events for children who may benefit. Next, we support family engagement activities both in person, when safe, and virtually. These may be fun get-togethers or learning activities. We also assist in training personnel to meet the unique needs of a person experiencing dual sensory loss. Last, we can assist in the school setting through observation, assistance with assessments, staff training, accessible materials, and providing information regarding best practices for deafblind students. If you suspect a child may have a dual sensory loss, please don't hesitate to reach out to us using the information listed.
I hope you've seen and heard and collected a lot of information for yourself and for your children. We will definitely be publicizing and putting out a lot of information to use. I hope you're able to watch it and apply and access it. You will definitely want to get this information. If you have any contact, please contact Beginning South Carolina. We are on Facebook. And again, thank you so much for watching and joining us. And definitely thankful to all of our supporters and vendors and audiologists and teachers of the deaf and everyone who's contributed and be a part of it. Thank you for your time, your support, sharing with us, being with us during this back to school batch. We hope you have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching. Also, a big thanks to our accessibility partner, AbleSC, for running the technology today. Logos, SC Association of the Deaf, Hands and Voices South Carolina, Beginnings SC, Irmo Fire Department, First Sound.